Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Shane Beamer, the South Carolina Gamecocks continue to be one of the most exciting teams in all of the country. I kind of talk about South Carolina. I'm talking about must-watch television every time they're playing on Saturday. But I think more importantly, this is a football team that is getting better as the season goes on. And I think has suddenly become a team that you don't want to see on your schedule in the month of November. And it kind of goes back to how we talked about this team early in the summer, previewing this 2024 season. A lot of it was this team could be really fun to watch. It could be a very good football team, but there were also a lot of question marks, right? What does Lenore Sellers look like as a redshirt freshman? You're starting a true freshman at left tackle. You have a lot of transfer portal additions kind of filling in this roster. I think the question was, how good can this team be? We're getting that answer going into the month of November. And you talk about like state of the program. It just continues to feel like even though they took a step back in 2023, it still feels like this program's just going in the right direction under Shane Beamer. Want to talk about a few different things. That I want to start with, what has really come together for the South Carolina team. Why do I think they're extremely dangerous in the month of November? But I think more excitingly, you're sitting here with a 5-3 record going into the month of November. There are a lot of winnable, but really fun and good games for South Carolina on the schedule. I think the sky's the limit, and I think this is certainly potentially a 9-3 football team at the end of November. Now, I don't know if that's going to be enough to get into the college football playoffs, but I think there's a avenue where that is a conversation that we're having at the end of November. Fired up to get into this one now. Before we do, and as always, to the South Carolina fans, appreciate you guys. It's this program, this team, this head coach. It's really fun to talk about. The amount of support y'all continue to show, it absolutely means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear how you're feeling about this South Carolina team heading into the month of November. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start with what makes this South Carolina team so dangerous. And then let's talk about where they can go in the month of November. Take a look at the schedule and kind of take a look at how high South Carolina can climb in these college football playoff rankings, where you should probably be a top 25 team. If we're being honest, they're not. You win against Vanderbilt. You're certainly a top 25 team, arguably a top 20 team come next Tuesday night when these rankings get out. Now, what makes this team dangerous? It starts with this South Carolina defense. I mean, you start taking a look at the most important metrics when you evaluate a defense. I mean, it obviously starts with points per game allowed. Like, how well are you just not letting teams score points on you? 18.9 points per game allowed for the South Carolina defense. That is top 15 in the country. This is the recipe for South Carolina, and this is, in my opinion, the storyline of the South Carolina season. It's stopping the run, getting after the passer on those second and third and longs. If you can stop the run on first and second down, then pin your ears back and get after the passer. We don't have to overcomplicate the sport of football, right? You stop the run, you get them into those passing situations, then you turn and pin your ears back and get after the passer at a high level. You're going to have a good defense. If you can do those things well, chances are you're going to be a pretty damn good defense. That's exactly what we're seeing South Carolina play. Let's start with this South Carolina pass rush. That probably the part of this team that is most improved since 2023. I mean, when we had the conversation last year, I think on paper, a lot of people got frustrated with the secondary underperforming. We thought that'd be a really good group heading in. A lot of the South Carolina fans who've watched a lot of football in South Carolina in 2023, y'all put this in the comment section. I went back and watched it. You were absolutely right. The struggles that South Carolina had defending the pass had so much more to do with the lack of pass rush than it did with these players not playing good in the back end. Like, suddenly South Carolina secondary didn't just become bad in 2023, but when you can't get a pass rush going and quarterbacks have clean pockets to throw to, and a lot of time at some point it just doesn't matter how good your secondary is. So the pass rush was a massive problem. You take a look at South Carolina, they're sacking the quarterback 11.2% of the time. That's number 4 in the country. They can get pressure off of pretty much any spot on the defensive line. I mean, you start with what I would maybe say is the best edge rushing combination that we see in the entire country. Kyle Kennard was solid at Georgia Tech. He has played himself into a first round NFL draft pick at South Carolina. And that's a massive storyline for South Carolina. Then you look on the other side and say, true freshman Dylan Stewart, we love this kid coming out of high school. We saw him in the spring game flash in a big way. And we kind of said that this kid, from what you saw as a 17-year-old kid that should be finishing out his year of high school, dominating that South Carolina spring game, we said, hey, he's got a bright future, but he's also got a bright future immediately. Like, this isn't a guy that needs a year or two to get acclimated to the SEC. Probably the most impressive true freshman pass rusher I've seen in a really long time. And so when you have the ability to get after the passer on both edge spots, it's really hard for an opposing offense to deal with. When you have one really good pass rusher, you can put a tight end over him. You can chip with a running back, chip with a tight end. You can do certain things to try to neutralize one really good player. When you have two really good edge rushers, it suddenly becomes a lot harder because you start chipping with two tight ends and leaving guys like 7-man pass protections. It's really hard to throw the football. And so that ability to get after the passer from both sides, extremely impressive. Then you look at the inside and say, Tonka Alex Hunley, but TJ Sanders, I don't think it gets much better as a pass rusher interior defensive lineman than him. And so you're just routinely getting pressure with your front four, which is when you don't have to send pressure, you don't have to leave your cornerbacks on islands. It takes a lot of pressure off the secondary when you can manufacture the amount of pass rush that South Carolina can have, not really scheming up any blitzes. That's the recipe. Now, we talked about the pass rush. They're also really good against the run, and I think it starts with the edge rushers, and it starts with the off-ball backers. Demetrius Knight is so far and away an upgrade from Stone Blanton last year. The line, like, we knew Debo Williams was the guy. Demetrius Knight coming in has been a revelation for South Carolina. He's an animal, consistently fitting the runs, attacking the line of scrimmage. But what stands out to me as well in the film, we talk about Dylan Stewart and how good he is getting after the passer. Same thing with Kyle Kennard. They're equally as good stopping the run and maintaining their edge and keeping their outside shoulder free. That's kind of the difference between really good edge defenders and like elite edge defenders. Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard, they'll win on first and second down stopping the run. Then when it's 3rd and 7 plus, they're pinning the ears back, and you just can't block these cats. So the ability for South Carolina to stop the run, set up those passing downs, and then get after the passer, that's the recipe to having an elite defense. That's how we see the South Carolina defense operate. Now, you go to the offensive side of the football, there were growing pains. I don't think anybody's arguing that, and that's to be expected. When you have Lenore Sellers, who, redshirt freshman, a guy that we liked out of high school, but kind of knew there was some development that needed to take place. And then you're starting a true freshman left tackle in Josiah Thompson with wide receivers that I give Dow Loggins, Shane Beamer, the South Carolina offensive coaching staff a lot of credit, where you probably don't have the wide receivers you want. That's probably a position you want to address in the transfer portal, but you're using your playmakers in the right way. Lean on Joshua Simon, lean on your running backs coming out of the backfield. That's how they've done it. And then you look at Lenore Sellers and say, they kind of found their identity on offense against Texas A&M. This is a run-first offense that wants to marry that rushing attack with some play action in the passing attack, and that's kind of what we saw. Yeah, Lenore Sellers completed less than 50% of his passes, but was averaging nearly 20 yards per completion. And so they're being explosive when they decide to throw the football. And if you can run the football efficiently, which South Carolina did against Texas A&M, and then marry that passing attack with the run game, that's the recipe to having, a really solid offense. And this South Carolina offense is not going to be a top 10 unit in the country, probably not even going to be a top 30 unit in the country. But if you can be solid, run the football, control the time possession, hit some explosive plays, not turn the football over, and lean on your defense, you can win a lot of football games that way. I think that's the second takeaway. Lenore Sellers hasn't turned the football over since, I believe, that Alabama game, I should say. And so if you're running the football, you're not giving the opposing offense short fields with turnovers, controlling the time of possession, being able to sprinkle in some explosive plays. That's how South Carolina has done it. And you take a look at the schedule for South Carolina. Again, they should be a top 25 team. I think that's a disaster that they're not ranked in the college football playoff rankings. You go on the road and beat Vanderbilt, who's a fringe top 25 team. Quite frankly, they should be ranked as well. Okay, you're top 20 team in the country. Then can you beat a Missouri team? That's another top 25 team in the country at home. If you can do that, if you win these back-to-back games here, you're sitting at potentially a top 15 team in the country. You get kind of a glorified bye week at Wofford. And then you go on the road at Clemson, who you're hoping is a top 20 team in the country when you play them. A 9-3 South Carolina team. Look, I don't think I'd bet my money that they'd make the college football playoffs, but you can damn well be sure that it's going to be a conversation. And so if South Carolina, which they might be favorites in every single football game they play the rest of the year, besides maybe on the road at Clemson, this is a team that I could see us having the conversation about South Carolina being college football playoff team. And I think that just speaks to Shane Beamer. It's a roller coaster of a season. It still might be a roller coaster of the season. You got 5 games that I think are all certainly winnable. And I wouldn't be surprised if South Carolina can insert themselves into that conversation. We'll close it out there. This South Carolina team, people are sleeping, and they shouldn't be. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate y'all. We'll talk to you guys later.